I really debated if I was going to make a video about the Punisher One Last Kill presentation, and I know that sounds dramatic because on paper, this should have been exactly what a lot of Marvel fans have been asking for, including myself. We have a set-aside presentation with Jon Bernthal back as Frank Castle, and we seem to have Disney letting this character be violent with a darker tone. So I didn't go into this thing wanting to hate it. I honestly went into this hoping it would prove something. I wanted this special to show why Frank Castle still matters in this version of the MCU, and I wanted to see where his head was after Daredevil Born Again Season 1. I was looking to see this broken, violent, grief-filled character and see how he could exist in the same world where he's apparently about to cross paths with Spider-Man. And unfortunately, I instead came out of this special feeling like Marvel just spent 45 minutes telling me something I already knew. Frank Castle is the Punisher. We knew that. Because at this point, I don't need another story about Frank wondering whether or not he's gonna keep being the Punisher. I don't really want another story where he tries to step away and gets dragged back into violence, questions his purpose, and then ends up right back where he started. Unfortunately, we've been watching that same version of that arc for almost a decade now, and while Jon Bernthal is still incredible in the role, I want to make that clear. Jon Bernthal is incredible in this role. He's not the issue at all here. If anything, he's the reason why this special has any weight at all. He brings so much pain and so much intensity to Frank Castle as a character. He feels like a guy who's been carrying grief around for so long that he doesn't know who he is without this grief anymore. But that's also what makes this so frustrating, because Jon Bernthal is giving everything he has, and yet the story still feels like it's stuck in the same place we were 10 years ago. So this is not a video of me saying that Jon Bernthal's iteration of the Punisher is some sort of failure. This is more about how Marvel has taken one of the best castings that they've ever had, and somehow they still keep wasting him by giving Frank the same emotional arc over and over again. And like I've said, the best part about this special is Jon Bernthal. I know that sounds obvious, but I think it needs to be said because even though I did not like the special overall, I do not think that Bernthal was cashing a check. He was a director and an actor. He was doing it all in this presentation. Well, let's finally move on to my biggest criticism here. I think the biggest problem with this special is that Frank still feels trapped in this same character cycle. Every version of his story seems to come back to the same basic question. Does Frank Castle still want to be the Punisher? And for a while, at the beginning of his character, that question made sense. But after a while, the same question starts losing its power because the answer never really changes. Frank always says he's done, that he can try to walk away and he can wrestle with his own conscience, but by the end of the story and each iteration we get of this character, he always comes back to the same place, and that is he's the Punisher. And I get it, that is the character, and I'm not saying that Frank Castle needs to become some happy, emotionally healthy guy. However, you can still have the darkness and the violence and that pain, but good character writing still needs movement. A character can stay tragic without feeling stuck in the same place, and that's the difference, because Frank doesn't need to become a completely new person in the MCU, but the story needs to tell us something new about the person he already is. The bottom line is that this special feels like a bridge and not a story necessarily. It never really feels like its own thing. It just feels like a bridge to Spider-Man Brand New Day, or a bridge to The Punisher Season 3 possibly, and I don't hate bridge stories automatically. Some of the best franchise storytelling, especially in the MCU, comes from smaller chapters that connect to the bigger events. But to me, this special felt more like Marvel checking a box and trying to float the idea out there to fans and get almost a number, a rating, to see if fans want this character back in the main scheme of the MCU. But to me, that just feels very empty, because by the end of this presentation, we end with Frank deciding that he's going to be Punisher, and that's information I already had. We knew Frank was supposed to appear in Spider-Man Brand New Day. This special could have done something really interesting. It could have shown how a character as brutal as the Punisher fits into the same story with Spider-Man in a PG-13 world. It could have shown a real contrast between those two characters and how we kind of bridged that gap between the Netflix version of the character and the MCU version of the character. Instead, I still feel like we're dealing with the same Frank. He's violent, he's grieving, unstable, but by the end, I didn't feel like I understood Frank in a new way. I didn't feel like the story had really pushed him into a different emotional space, and I'm not really that interested to see how he fits into Spider-Man's world. It just, to me, feels like they said, here is Frank, here he is again before this movie, and for a character this intense by an actor that is this great, that's just simply not good enough. I also had a big issue with the pacing in this show. I want to be very fair here because slow doesn't mean that a movie or show is automatically bad. Some of my favorite movies and shows are slow burns, but slowness has to reveal something. A slow character study should make me understand the character more, and the first 30 minutes of this show are slowly building and building tension, but it didn't really do anything for me. There are moments where you can see what they were going for. You can see that they want Frank to feel lost and have him feel like a man who has reached the end of his revenge and has no idea what to do with himself. And on paper, that's a good idea. But the problem is, it doesn't have enough time to fully explore this idea, but it also spends too much time setting it up. And to me, that just sounds contradictory, but it's just how I felt. The special is too short to become a deep character study, but the first half is too slow for it to work as a tight action thriller. So the pacing lands in this weird middle ground where I kept waiting for the story to either dig deeper or move faster, and for a while nothing really happened. Because we had already seen Frank's trauma, we've already seen him suffer, but the first 30 minutes of this special just kept on referring to that, and I don't know, I just didn't really feel anything when I would see those scenes because I guess I had already felt that in the past for this character. However, the last 20 minutes of this show is when the action kicks in, and that's definitely when the special is at its best. You know, the last stretch is easily the strongest part. It has great violence, great brutality, and it really did capture some of that great Netflix era street level stuff that I really didn't expect the MCU to dive into. And I know for some people that might be enough, and some viewers just probably just came into this looking for like a John Wick style thing, and they probably got that and they were very happy. But I've never been the biggest John Wick guy, so for me that just never really fit in here. I want good action, but I want action that makes me feel something, and for me I never really felt anything with this presentation. I just think the whole Nucci family side of the story felt really undercooked, and I'm not saying that every villain needs some kind of crazy backstory, but they set them up and then they just kind of leave it unresolved and almost felt very cheap and almost like they were dangling keys saying, hey, remember this storyline from the comics? Would you want to see that in a future season of The Punisher? Well, make sure to tune in to Disney Plus and watch. And it just felt very icky to me. I don't know. I just didn't love how they handled those villains in this story, and they could have been a great villain if this was an actual maybe hour and a half even. I know that's even pushing it, but if we could have gotten something like that where we actually got to see that resolution and see him finish off this family on screen and not off screen, it would have made this at least something pretty interesting. I'm not even going to get on the bad VFX and that one CGI shot that everybody's been talking about. I mean, it looks rough. I don't want to be too dramatic, but I didn't really care. I had to rewind it just to make sure my eyes saw what I saw. But at the end of the day, this presentation had a lot more going on that was not great in my opinion besides that, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But at the end of the day, guys, this whole thing just felt strangely incomplete. It wasn't horrible and it wasn't unwatchable as some people have been talking about it. It just felt very nothing, and for a character that I feel like has been kind of underutilized by Marvel, I was really hoping that this set alone kind of thing would have been really great for the character, and unfortunately for me anyways, it just felt like nothing. However, I am still excited to see Frank in Spider-Man Brand New Day and see how him and Peter kind of go around and see how they go about using their different philosophies together. I think that's going to be really interesting to see on the big screen, but let me know what you guys thought about this presentation and this video down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.